Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, it's me, the Ludo double G, and welcome to my review of Kaiju number 8. So Kaiju number 8 is a series that currently has the full first season out, so this is my review of the first season. Now, in this season, there are 12 episodes, exactly 12 episodes. Now, I don't know where this, 12 episode thing has come from, but it seems like a lot of new anime are doing that. I'll talk more about that later, but yeah, it's a quick watch, so that's the good thing about it. It's also very easy to watch. It's not super thought provoking in a lot of ways. I mean, it's a shonen, you know. A lot of shonens, you don't really have to think too much, and I think that that's wonderful. However, this is a show that follows a lot of similar tropes, right? There's somebody who really wants something, who is either really good at something or really bad at something, and our main character happens to be really bad at something. Essentially, in this world, kaijus have come to fruition, and there's an awesome team of people who take down these kaijus, right? And he happens to really want to be a part of this team. He really sucks at taking the test for it, and so he's really old now to kind of be a part of the team, and instead he opts to be part of the kaiju cleanup crew. So whenever this team beats a kaiju, they have to go and chop them up and clean up the kaiju and all of those things. So he decides to be a part of that so that he can be close to the action in some sort of way. So obviously he gains a lot of knowledge in this regard, but still isn't really his dream, right? Throughout the show, we realize that the captain of this particular team, Defense Force, I keep saying just team, Defense Force, happens to be his childhood friend who we've been seeing throughout the show with flashbacks and things like that, who is, may I say, a very dashing looking character. Regardless, as it comes out, we kind of see his journey through being a part of the Defense Force, and spoiler alert, this happens in the first episode. He gets to turn into a kaiju somehow, some way. So he ends up turning into a kaiju, and the majority of the season kind of follows this, right? And so now we get into the meat and potatoes of the review. Some of the things I really enjoyed about this are that it's super funny. It doesn't take itself too seriously, which I think whenever you watch, Naruto, for example, not to say Naruto isn't funny, but I think Naruto as a main character takes himself so seriously that it's great for that show, but Kafka, who is the main character of the show, doesn't. And he's really goofy and funny and silly, and his closest friends happen to be 18-year-olds because they're all that age as they're trying to join the Defense Force. So that's really interesting. It makes for an interesting dynamic between him and Reno. And the Defense Force that he does end up joining, the captain of that ends up being Mina Ashiro, who is Mina Ashiro. One day I'll get names correctly. And she's the most baddest of asses as far as captains are concerned, and you kind of see her in action throughout, and he is actively trying to get up to her, right? And he wants to be by her side, and that's his whole thing. And so he's very serious about that, but overall he doesn't take himself too seriously. Now, to some people that would be a con. For somebody like myself who kind of in a lot of ways takes his dreams too seriously, it's kind of nice and refreshing. However, a lot of people might not like that. So off to some of the side characters. So I talked about Reno briefly, and there's another one who is worth talking about. Her name is Shinomiya. I had to look at my notes here just to make sure. Those are the two kind of main side characters other than the vice captain, who takes on a very Levi-esque role, right? Who he's very specific in his skill set, but he's absolutely amazing in that skill set. And I think other than him being a friend and believer in Kafka, I mean, he doesn't have much meat and potatoes to him at the moment. However, the cool factor, fucking through the roof, right? But regardless, so we're talking about Reno and Shinomiya. I hope I'm saying these things correctly. They're very interesting. So she comes in as a character who's very I'm super talented and awesome, and my dad is the captain of all of the Defense Force or whatever, right? And so we kind of see her at first and we're oh, you're cocky and you suck. But then as the season goes on, you kind of start to realize, oh, she has just as much pressure on her as everybody else does. So you do kind of get to sympathize with her, right? And you really truly see that she's trying to find her own way and be herself while being super really awesome and talented. And Kafka like saves her, and there's this moment between these two characters who didn't really like each other at first that is super super special, and you just kind of know that they have each other's backs. And that's what I really also like about the show, is that you're like, okay, who's gonna rat out Kafka, who's not gonna rat out Kafka, and all of those things, and you just kind of quickly understand that, like, yes, friendship prevails, or like camaraderie prevails in like a lot of shonen. In this one, however, I felt like I really wasn't sure, especially with the vice captain, and you can tell he's kind of starting to figure it out. And Reno, from the get go, you kind of knew he was never gonna tell, because that was like Kafka's like main squeeze, you know. Regardless, I really like that aspect of the show. Now, the third thing that I would really like to discuss is that in this show, Kafka tends to, when he's in his like kaiju mode, win fights pretty easily. And to some people that's a good or bad thing, right? So if you look at Zoro from One Piece, or like Levi, or even like All Might in some instances, they kind of end fights pretty quickly. Same thing goes for Kafka in his kaiju mode, right? And so as he's like going through and like figuring in his kaiju powers out in the beginning, things happen pretty quickly, and he's able to like kill other kaiju with like one punch, not to be confused with One Punch Man. Uh, and as time goes on, you kind of begin to see the severity of each kaiju depending on like how much force he needs to use in order to take out a certain kaiju. Now, I think that's a really good gauge as to like power scaling and things like that for YouTubers who are into like power scaling, or like people who are into doing that just for fun. I know in some instances, like I love like kind of just thinking about those things. And so I think, in addition to like the seismic ratings of each kaiju and all of those things, I think that's also a really good way to like measure certain kaiju. So as he's like fighting kaiju number 9 and other big bads of the season, you kind of get the vibe that, like, okay, while he is really powerful and he's cut above the rest, he's not the most powerful right now. And so there's obvious room for growth, right? So I don't think Kafka being overpowered is going to be much of a problem, as he is also like not really like the big, like, he's not at his final form yet. Not to like quote Dragon Ball, right? But he's not at his final form yet. And so I'm really seeing like a lot of room for growth there. I know I said the last thing was going to be my last point, but this is truly going to be my last point. So, my most favorite part of this anime currently is kind of their power systems. So, like, in an anime where nobody really has powers other than like Kafka, they come up with a really clever way to get the powers from the kaiju and implement it into their own power systems. So they have these power suits where you're able to like draw out percentage of your powers, right? And I believe like having more than like a few percent in the beginning is like insane. And most people like land around like the 10%. And I think like as the season goes on, uh Hikaru Shinomiya just ends up at like 40 something or 30 something, and then Reno's kind of not far behind her. I'm trying not to like step on manga stuff because I've read up to chapter 70 right now. Which is why I'm like kind of talking weird, because I'm trying to remember what is and isn't correct. Even though I just watched this season. And so whenever a certain character ends up you like bringing out their full power, their like weapons and things like that that they use, whether it's a gun or like an axe or whatever, they're able to draw out their own power to basically make it more powerful, right? And so we're talking about Captain Ashiro. She uses like this big cannon where she's able to draw out like 97% of her power or something along those lines. And then the vice captain uses these like swords because he's more of a close combat kind of character, where he draws out like 91%. And so like obviously the captains and vice captains are really high, whereas like the normies are kind of below, right? And you can even see like if you watch this or read it, you'll really quickly understand like what the power scaling is there, and it's super super clear in the form of numbers, quite literally told to you by the mangaka. So that's cool. But honestly, that's like super super creative to me, and I think that I'm trying not to like step on manga stuff like I said earlier, but Shinomiya's dad, the big kahuna of the defense force, he's able to draw out Kaiju number two's powers, right? Because he ends up using it uh in his own like bodysuit and all that. So he had to learn to use all of that stuff. So that's also super cool in that whenever they defeat a really big kaiju like Kaiju number two or whatever, they can actually get that kaiju's power and implement it into their suits, which is really, really awesome because if there's like a big situation where we need the Kaiju number two's power, or they're trying to get Kaiju number eight's powers or whatever to make it into science and blah 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 blah. They're able to do that. But now that adds another reason for them when and if they do find out who Kafka is, how whether or not they want to kill him or and take his power because that could be really used for the world, or do they just run around and let him blah 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 blah. I'll let you like mull that over. So I've talked a lot about the good things about this. So some of the things that I don't like right off the bat, the first thing that you're going to see in this show, maybe it's the second episode. I hate the opening. The opening is absolute and utter garbage in every way. So the song, first of all, what are we listening to? Pitbull? Like this song is absolute garbage. It's not fun. I've never felt so strongly about hating an opening. It's bad. It's bad. It's bad. It's bad. Now the animation, the opening's CGI animation is dookie boopy pants. Absolutely dookie poopy pants. Not good. It's all CGI'd. I've talked to some people who are like, oh yeah, so and so says they like it. Yeah, well, I don't. I hate it. I'm not a hater. I like to recognize that I'm sure a lot of hard work went into making that song, went into making that opening. I despise it. I think it's bad. And a lot of newer anime, so like Fire Force, Dandadan, Jujutsu Kaisen, like all of these newer big animes all have a very memorable and really, really good first opening. This one straight up does not. So, if you're looking for a really good opening to put in your anime opening playlist, this is not going to be the one for you. The second thing, I feel like the first episode to this anime wasn't the best. It didn't necessarily hook me. Now that's not the biggest problem in the world to me. I usually try and give them a couple episodes before I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna watch this. And even then, I still like watch them even if they're garbage, because I like to like finish a story and things like that. But the first episode is kind of slow until we get to the end where Kafka becomes the kaiju, right? Becomes kaiju number 8. That's about where it starts to pick up a little bit. But the first episode isn't really gonna hook you. So maybe if you go into it knowing that, you're gonna be like, okay, ready. So I'm here to inform you about that. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's like the worst, but it's not my favorite. I will say it's not my favorite first episode. The other thing I don't super like, and I feel like this is an anime, and I feel like this is an anime specific problem or like new anime. I talked about it briefly, but it only has 12 episodes. Now, I wonder if this is their way of like not catching up with the manga so quickly, given that I think at the moment, and let me double check this, given that at the moment there's only 117 chapters, and I'm not quite sure what their chapter to anime relationship is, like as in are they doing 2 chapters for every one or things like that. They only have 12 episodes for the season. I On one hand I do understand the not wanting filler. Like nobody really likes filler anymore. And honestly, I don't know if anybody ever really has liked filler. Naruto's a huge proponent of that. One Piece not really, because there's just been so much forever. Fairy Tail's another one for sure, where there's just so much filler that it just starts to become a problem. So I can totally see how anime studios might not want to be putting filler or at least put themselves in a position to make filler, but I honestly don't really love the whole 12 episode thing. I would have almost preferred for them to have waited until the manga went a little further along to animate it, right? Just cuz like maybe it's because I like One Piece and Naruto and really long animes. And like I said, Dandadan's another proponent of this as well, which is also a newer anime that's been coming out this year, that like it's a 12 episode thing. And I feel like I go too long without it in between seasons, right? Like I watched this show some time ago and I had to go back and kind of rewatch it to make this video a little bit because it had been so long. Whereas like Jujutsu and like My Hero all have 24 episode long seasons, and unfortunately this one does not. So like I don't know, I want to kind of think about this and research this a little bit more, like as I'm like going through reviewing animes and stuff, because it seems like a lot of the newer ones are starting to do this, and I kind of hope it doesn't stay, because I really love the idea of sitting down and being able to binge and watch 24 episodes of an anime, you know. But then again, it might just be catering to the younger generation of this earth, who are a little more impatient when it comes to watching shows and things of that nature. So maybe y'all are like Louie, you're just a fucking boomer and you wish things were how they used to be. For some things, sure. More specifically, my anime episodes. I'd really like to have 24 episodes for a season. If you like this review, please hit me with a comment, with a like, with a subscribe. If you want to see me do another season review, come on down to Louie Town and throw us a comment. Next one's probably gonna be Dandadan. So yeah, bye.